I dreamt of opening a bakery, a home bakery out of my garage. And I figured if I could wake up at 4 a.m. as opposed to my 3 a.m. wake ups that I've been doing for the last year, I could prep and I could bake and then I could get my kids up and off to school. And then when I got back, I would open up the bakery. And then by 1, I would close it and get cleaned up and then go get the kids and be present with them and do the activities and do the homework and get them to bed. And then I would prep for the next day and life would be great.
Welcome to the Louder Than Silence podcast with your host, CG Wagner. This episode is part of a series from Survivor to Leader, where the other staff members and I are having discussions about all things LTS and what it means to be leading the work in long-term care for survivors of sexual violence. It's a mix of our own personal experiences, the work our team does, and how those two things impact each other. Our hope is that survivors feel seen and validated, and supporters gain a deeper understanding of what the healing process looks like. Our episode today is recovering from burnout and trauma. 2 months ago, we had a conversation about overfunctioning and how it's manifested in our lives. Last month, we followed that up with discussing the connection between overfunctioning, codependency, and burnout. Today, we want to close out this conversation by exploring what it means to recover from burnout, but also what it means to recover from the damage of trauma. We decided to weave these two together a little bit in this context, since so many survivors have to unlearn a lot of messages around needing rest, being bad or negative in some way. So, that's where our conversation is taking us today. We're taking a practical look at recovery. With me today, I have our social media and marketing manager, Christy, our development manager, Brittany, and our program manager, Joe. All right, ladies, are we ready to do this?
Let's do
So,
it.
we're doing it. We're going to start with the question. Can each of you share a little about a time when you were burned out and how it manifested for you?
So I was thinking earliest memories or more most recent. Um,
What a great question.
so one of my earlier memories would have been throughout my middle school, high school years. I did everything I could to get into a good college. Education's very important to my father. He worked in higher education for 20 years. And he set the standard of, with my siblings, of what we needed to do or what was expected in order to get into what he considered a good school. Me, being rebellious me, um, was like, screw that. My first 2 years of high school, and I messed around with my grades. But I did stay heavily involved, knowing that activities were very important and very meaningful for college applications. And when I say heavily involved, I ended up, when I applied to college, having multiple pages on my resume of activities. Um, I did everything, and I did it before school started, and I did it until 9 o'clock at night, and I did it on the weekends. So I refocused on my academics my last 2 years, and I even changed schools because of the expectations that were had of me, and what I wanted. I knew I at that point wanted to go to as good of a school as I could get into. So I stepped away from influences that left me more towards like partying, and I kept my head down, kind of changed my friend group, and I began working I began working on top of going to school and all of my activities because then at 16 I had bills to pay. So I only took time off when I traveled with my family, and my parents had started a new business, and so that was just a couple of days each year. Um, I worked on weekends and holidays, and then when I got into the University of Texas at Austin, I did nothing. I did absolutely nothing. And everybody around me was joining organizations and meeting people by different like activities and social groups. And I couldn't do it. Um, I went to class like the bare minimum that I could get away with. I was exhausted. I remember just telling everyone, people, including my parents, were like, "Oh, what are you going to do? What are you going to join?" And I was just like, "Nothing. I'm doing nothing. I can't do anything else." And so I didn't realize at the time that it was burnout, but I knew how much I'd put on my plate previously to get to where I was. But then once I got there, I couldn't really enjoy it because I was just so exhausted. And, looking back, I'm very grateful. I feel very privileged that my parents, they supported me financially through school. And I know that's not the case for most people. Um, but between the burnout to get there and the trauma in high school and the trauma in college, I had approached them about taking a gap year because I was entering into severe depression and was just so tired. I was just remember being so tired. Um, they respectfully declined um, if I wanted to continue to receive their financial support. So I stuck with it, doing the minimum, and then numbing myself as I felt needed until I finished school. And then after that, it was straight into the workforce, right? So my healing and recovery didn't really occur until my late 30s, early 40s. Um, and what happened was things just began compounding on top of this. But I feel like that was kind of my foundation of overfunctioning to where it was physically, emotionally, mentally very difficult to function for a period and just remember trudging through it. Um, so that's my experience.
Yeah, I was so during one of these weeks when we started talking about this, I mentioned that I used to get kidney stones. So I would like overfunction. Like I would usually it would often happen after like a pregnancy. Pregnancy is like a lot on your body. Um, but like looking at it now, like I was just living in constant disassociation, constant fatigue, constant like go, 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 go. Living off of coffee, which coffee is like the number one cause of kidney stones. Um, Coffee and dehydration, and stress. But yeah, so that was like the way it would manifest for me. In like this very loud, like you cannot, your body's screaming, like you have to do something. And if anybody has ever had kidney stones, it's like 10 level of pain. And it like, there's no like, okay, and then we have a baby. It's like, no, you're just in pain. um, but it was interesting as I was sitting with like kind of more like, how does this manifest now? I was thinking like I feel like I am in burnout right now. Last summer, so 13, 14 months ago was when I asked for a divorce. It was not a like smooth transition. It was a whole lot of horrible. And I think about last summer and I was in fight or flight. I was in how do I protect myself? How do I protect these children? What do I like? Um, and so with that, maybe this conversation is helpful for me right now. I can look at this like I'm finally coming to a point where like I'm starting to feel like I'm allowed to rest. Um, but the like what's manifesting right now is like lack of creativity, being tired all the time, having that like just that level of like I feel weight. Like I feel like my body is heavier than it should be. Um, and everything feels taxing.
like the normal, like, oh, I have to get up and I have to send how many emails, and it's like, oh my, like it's just like like I feel, but then with it comes the like self judgment of the like, oh my God, you're so dramatic. Oh my God, you're so lazy. And so trying to learn to balance the like, you're not lazy, you're exhausted, you're not dramatic, you're overwhelmed. Um, and yeah, right now, like I financially am like not doing well and should be getting a second job, but also know that like if I get a second job, I don't think I would emotionally survive. So it's like I get to emotionally survive and financially dig a hole at the moment until things balance. And learning to like that is okay right now because it is better for my kids to have a happy mom who has debt than to have a depressed mom who is financially better off. So yeah, this topic is spot on for me at my current life stage.
Um, Man, for me, similar to Brittany, I think when I look back and look for, okay, when was the time when I noticed burnout? I look for like, when do I notice stress as can't talk today, guys. Stress as it at its highest. There's my brain. Um, and so for me, it was, in college, I can recognize what it was now. I was a law major, I was clerking for a judge. I had become pregnant with our first. I didn't recognize, um, sexual harassment as sexual harassment because it was the 90s. And it wasn't until after having my daughter that I realized like what was occurring, the sexual harassment that was occurring in that space. But how my body responded to that was like I would have part of my lip swell up, or part of my eye, or my eye would just twitch when I would go into the office, or if I had to go on like a DOA, um, which is like a what we called him a death call, but like if it was a JP, so justice of the peace. So if he was going to go do a pronouncement and I would ride in the car with him, I would have twitchy eye. Um, and or I remember getting my wedding ring cut off one time because like just my fingers swelled up. And I had to get the band cut off because like sticking my finger in the ice wasn't reducing the swelling. And so there was a lot of things going on, right? Like I had a new baby. I was still working in an environment that now I recognize was like not healthy. And the stress and demand of like trying to figure out which way to, like the stress of being torn as a parent, right? Like I wanted, my mom wasn't able to stay at home with me. My mom was a single mom. And so me had this desire to like be at home with my daughter, and then not being able to, because I needed to work, and all of those things. And so for me, it accumulated when uh, something was said to me, and I had my daughter with me because I was showing her to the people in the office or whatever. And I went home that day and I was like, I just can't go back. Um, and what's interesting is I was like, as that came to mind and I was reflecting on just the weight of that stress, is because then after that, like I just felt very, not necessarily, I felt very safe in my home, but disconnected outside of it. Um, and then thankfully, had a spouse. I mean, I still have the same spouse, but like he's not gone. But had that guy, my spouse, was very supportive in like letting me be at home and all of the things. Like he was like, I'll do what we need to do for you to be at home. And so I can reflect back on that now and realize, like when I talk to people about burnout, is the only antidote, like the only cure, is literally rest. And we live in a society where we can't. And so I think that's like I can look back at that now and see that. And then obviously, if I fast forward to present time, and burnout. And when I've experienced it, we had navigated some other things with a kiddo. And it was like at the end of it, I just completely, it was like I was a zombie. Um, and and so it's not so much about the circumstances of any of those things. It's more about like I didn't have the stress tolerance, or like that right, like window of tolerance, but like I wasn't able to manage the stress. And so when I started noticing signs, navigating this stuff, like I don't know how many years now, 10, I don't know, 8, I would have twitchy eye again. And I would have like lip swelling, and like had started having what I thought I was misdiagnosed with lupus when I was 20, because of those autoimmune, like because of those weird responses. Like I wasn't diagnosed with PTSD at that time. I was diagnosed with, oh, it must be an autoimmune because you're too young, all the things, so it's got to be this. But I recognize that now as like, first of all, somatically and physiologically, my body was just like, and couldn't complete any kind of stress cycle, let alone, handle any kind of additional stress. But after both of those periods that stand out to me, the biggest thing that I think I just naturally did, but I didn't know at the time, was like being more gentle with myself, but I wouldn't have put it that way. Like I would have just been like, okay, I'm sleeping when the baby sleeps, or I'm whatever, you know what I mean? Or, fast forward to whenever we did the other stuff, like, okay, I'm not going to worry about school with the kids today because we're just going to go to a park and play because that's what I had the capacity for. Um, and so I see a rest that looks different in both of those spaces. Yeah, that's a long answer, guys. So.
Well, I'm thankful for your long answers because I feel like I have learned so much about myself from hearing what all of you just said, and I'm like, oh no. Um, because I hadn't considered looking back at like my childhood self until Brittany, like you said that, and I was like, oh, okay. That's what all those things were when I was 15 years old, and and so it is. Isn't self-awareness wonderful? It's just so great.
The gift that
Um,
keeps giving.
yes, but also, Chrissy, when you said the twitchy eye, one of my coworkers and I at one of the jobs would joke about how it was like the year of twitchy eye because like as soon as like either of us would step in the building, we would both like our eyes would just like start twitching. Um and like seeing that now being like, right, that's not normal or healthy. And Joe, what you alluded to as well, there's so many times where I can look back at different periods and see the health implications and like what was happening with my health that at that same job that was the year of the twitchy eye, I remember I had a like a Fitbit at that point, and so I was standing there talking with a coworker and I like gestured, and so like the little screen like turned on, right, and he could like see what it said. And he's like, "Is that accurate?" And I'm like, "I mean, I think so. Like, I don't." He's like, "It says your resting heart rate is 115." He's like, "What is ha-" And I'm like, "I don't know." Like, I just like, but like, it didn't occur to me to actually sit with, like, what is happening right now? Like, wh why is my like resting heart rate that of a person who is exercising? Like, what is that? And um, I had another coworker email a former manager that she didn't know was a former manager, whose email was forwarded to me, saying that when she had come into work, it looked like CG was going to snap at any moment. And instead of me, like, I had no space to even be like, what is happening in my world and in my life that it's to that extent where like the staff are concerned that like I'm gonna snap at any point. And so like I can see all these things now where it's like clearly that was burnout. Just like so very clearly. And um and I just had no clue. It was just like I was just trying to make it through that next whatever it was, the next shift, the next day, the next week. And there was no space for like what is happening here on a deeper level. But emotionally, the thing I would say for um how burnout manifests for me is typically it's like a feeling of apathy where it's just I cannot convince myself to summon the caring for typically myself, right? I would be able to care for other people well and still manage that energy. But then when it came to feeding myself or exercising or like doing something that I know would make my life better, I just couldn't. It was beyond me at that point. And everything was just sort of gray. I think that's the best way to describe it. So now that we've talked all about how fun all of this has been for us, what does it look like for you to recover from burnout and how have you addressed it?
I do want to interject with a as a visual person, you describing burnout as gray is spot on, at least for me. Everything felt very, I mean, it's almost like which can also resemble like depression, like you think of Eeyore and everything's kind of like a bluish gray. Um, but recovering from burnout, you actually, for me, I started to see color again. I started to see like life and creation and creativity and like the energy in things around me. So I thought it was really spot on when you said gray. And now as we move into discussing recovery, for those listening, like the color's there. Color comes back. And for me, that happened when I started to slow down. Yeah, a lot of people might think it looks like laziness, and several of us have touched on that. I have to personally check myself on judging me with these like negative thoughts about being lazy, um, and sometimes even other people, and go back to like, okay, what's going on with whoever? Like, they could just be very, very tired. They could be burnt out. That rest, slowing down, like sloth speed, slowing down. For me, it's like no emails, no technology, because my brain goes like this with technology, as many of us experience. Um, Recovery looks like a mental and physical break. And it for real recovery, it depends on how much and how long I've been going for. If it's a short season of having to do like a project or job or school or whatever, something kind of intense for a period of time, like that could look different if it has been years, which many of us have experienced. Then the recovery, it's just like what they say when you're pregnant, you're creating this baby for 9 months, and our society in America especially expects women to be healed in days, maybe sometimes weeks. But really, our healing lasts just as long, if not longer, as it took to make the baby. And so I see burnout as the same. Like, however long you were in the season of burnout, it's going to take just as long or longer for the recovery, has been my experience. When I was going through my divorce, my parents were very concerned with what I was doing with my time while I was attempting to figure out my next steps, my next work, what I wanted my life to look like. And I had just stepped away from a business with my ex that I had built and was pouring 12, 15-hour days into for a year. And I was exhausted from the marriage, and I was exhausted from the business and from the divorce, and grieving. I was also grieving all of it. And my kids were grieving, and divorce is messy. So I chose to slow down, and I didn't know it was a healing thing. It was something very intuitive, that I just knew I needed to pause and allow myself to dream about what I wanted to do with my life, how I wanted to support my family, all the different ways that could look, um, how I wanted to live in a way that didn't lead me to burnout again. And funny enough, the first thing that I dreamt of, because I really wanted to be present with my children, I just spent the last year not being very involved, and it broke my heart because I had even homeschooled them before that. So it was kind of a very like large swing to the pendulum. And I had dreamt of opening a bakery, a home bakery out of my garage. And I figured if I could wake up at 4 a.m. as opposed to my 3 a.m. wake ups that I've been doing for the last year, I could prep and I could bake, and then I could get my kids up and off to school. And then when I got back, I would open up the bakery. And then by 1, I would close it and get cleaned up and then go get the kids and be present with them and do the activities and do the homework and get them to bed. And then I would prep for the next day and life would be great. And that's just wild. I was dreaming of burnout. Like I was like setting myself up for burnout. And I was excited about it because I could do it because we live in the era of hustle, right? Um, and I literally heard God tell me one day while I was standing next to my kitchen pantry, like dream bigger. And I'm very thankful that I interpreted that as not do more, but go wider, experience more with doing less. And so that's what I ventured to do at that point in time. Um, so in my mind, recovering is a slowing down where you can and when you can, and also what does that look like for your next steps, your next chapters.
I love that you I love that your like initial Brit was to like dream of burnout, right? Because what that's touching on though is that like that was burnout was normal, right? So when you dreamed about what's next, your brain is like, well, this is what normal is me filling every moment of every of the day with something to do a thing, right? Like that is what comfort felt like for you. Um and to like be able to like pause instead of just like jumping into another normal, which is burnout if you've lived in burnout, right? I love that you like stopped and were like, oh, maybe I'm going to like widen my ideas of what this might be able to look like. Like maybe I'm going to be able to change this pattern that like and in a culture where like even when you pointed out pregnancy, like we burnout is normal, like, but it's not that we like normalize, like, okay, everyone will burn out and then you need to pause and have a gap year. Like, we don't. We like call people who take gap years like the lazy ones or the eccentric or the eclectic, or like they don't fit into the norm. Like the norm is that you just like keep working your butt off, get a promotion, and then work to like get another promotion. And it's not like, oh yeah, you got the promotion now. Like stop, pause, enjoy it. Um, so I love that just like to bring in that element of like, of course your dream was burnout. You that was normal. Like even going back to your example of childhood, like your parents are like, yeah, burnout. This is what you want. This is what you do. So I just love that. Um, Speaking of burnout, it makes me think of the a book that I don't I CG read this, I read it. I think it's called Burnout. Um,
Emily Nagasaki, right?
you would have to spell
Yeah.
it out for me.
Yep. That's the one.
Highly recommend it.
I definitely recommend it as well. It was an amazing read. It was very eye-opening. And now that I think about it, probably something I should read again. Um, but she talks about the like stress cycle, right? Um, because the reality is that even if you like develop the calmest life and give yourself all this room for rest, like the phrase like shit happens. Like life will dysregulate you. And even like as a mom right now, I have two teenagers and I have been talking to them about like that level of like, okay, you notice that you hit fight or flight, and then do you like, what do you do next? Like, okay, do you feel all the energy in your body? Like, how can you move it out of your body? Um, because like I am still figuring that out myself. So I'm like, hey, let's have a group think about this. Can you tell me what do I do? Um, and so some of the ways that I have learned to like complete that stress cycle is to move. I had a stressful day yesterday and I like messaged CG and I was like, I'm gonna go mow the lawn because I know when I sweat, my body's like, oh, I did a thing. And it's hot as heck here in Florida. So I was like, okay, I can guarantee a good sweat. My lawn could use it. This is great. I'm going to go move my body and get like also disconnecting from the situation that was causing me stress, right? It's like leaving the stress there. Um, for me, there is definitely something about like a location. So like if I'm, stressed out about work, sitting down at my desk is like my body's like, this is the area that's stressful. If I'm like in a texting battle with someone, my phone will be the stressor. If it's, me and the kids at home and whatever, there's something about location for me specifically. And so I will like go on a walk. If it's in my house, I will go outside. If it's real bad, I'll be like, hey guys, we're all going to go to the beach because the beach makes me happy. So change location. So something about moving, something about the location for me specifically. Sometimes just like emoting, like if you need a good cry, cry. If you need to like scream it out, like grab a pillow, put it over your face, scream. Um, my kids have tried to tattle on each other for like writing mean notes. And I'm like, hey, I would rather you write down all the angry words in your brain right now at your sibling, like write them down and then like crumple it up. Cool. And so like I've taught them that, like, yeah, go write an angry letter. I don't care if it's full of cuss words. That's great. Just put them on a piece of paper instead of saying it to the sibling you're mad at. So there is something about like finding a way to release all that energy in you that is so helpful. So you don't get to the point where you're just like, for me, a lot of burnout is that like isn't just the depression that comes. It can be this like anxious, like I feel all of this energy in my body and it doesn't know where to go. So that it just feels closed in. And then I feel exhausted because like all I feel like I'm doing is like holding back all these emotions. So it can be helpful to like find ways to release them. Before, my way of releasing them would be like, go watch a sad movie because like I would get to the point where I was so disconnected from why I needed to cry that I couldn't just like think about the thing and let it come. I would have to like outsource it. So I'd be like, okay, I can cry about this sad drama and their life. I'll let myself cry about that. Um, and now I can cry. I cry all the time now. It is not a problem anymore. But as somebody who used to be very disconnected from that, like that would be my way of doing it. Um, I still love like a good comedy. Like I will watch episodes of Office all the time because there's something about laughing that like breaks up energy in your body. Um, and the other part, like I had said earlier to the question is like right now, me recovering from burnout is like putting shit on a credit card that I really wish I could pay off because I know that right now my priority needs to like be maintaining the life I have and enjoying it and letting myself rest and recover. And I still don't know kind of where you were at, Brittany. I still don't know what exactly next looks like. Um, but I know I don't want to jump into the pattern of burnout or over giving to people or having crappy boundaries or all of the things that were really normal for my life up until now. Um, I don't want to do those again. So I'm in a buff. My life is buffering right now. And I'm just telling myself that that is okay.
Um, Kudos on the book. So CG had first given me that book at my first retreat with LTS. And so I was like, oh, what's this? And I still recommend that book to this day to people. And I usually will have one or two in my office to, to give away. Um, so highly recommend it because like Joe is saying, is it addresses the different things in regards to the stress cycle and completing the stress cycle. And, um, you know, I think I mentioned it the last time, like when your watch is telling you to move or when your watch is telling you to take breaths, like it's measuring your coherence. And if if you're out of coherence, then you're in fight or flight, you're in your sympathetic nervous system. And so that's why it tells you those things. So some of us need a reminder on our wrist to breathe. I actually have reminders set up. So the way that looks like for me, I'm pretty intentional now about how I call it like maintenance or just kind of like maintaining. Um, I also have the tendencies, like Britt said, of just like, oh, yes, and I'm going to do all these things now that I can do these things. Um, Also, I think a component that doesn't get the airwaves that it needs is ADHD. So I was a 1980s diagnosed ADHD kid. And so um, people with ADHD have higher prevalence of burnout because there's this like overarching message that potentially has been communicated to them throughout their lives is like, you need to do more, you're not doing enough, or like, why don't you have the motivation for that? Like, depending on how it fleshes out for a person, if it's inattentive or if it's hyperactivity. And the hyperactivity is not hyper body, it's hyper brain, the brain focusing on in and all the things. And so for me, it's an important lens for me to consider because I think that that's how I got into the cycles of like, oh yeah, I can do that. And I would commit to doing things. And then I would be like, oh my gosh, how did I end up committing to all of that stuff? And it's because whatever the day was that I was asked, I had the energy to do the thing. And so I was like, oh, yeah, that sounds fun, right? Because there's a compulsivity part of it of like, yeah, that sounds great. Let's do it. That sounds like a great idea, right? And so let's make it happen. And so for me, that's a lens I have to consider in things. So the ways that practically that works out for me is like I have reminders on my phone that will just do a little vibrate that will prompt me to just breathe. And it sounds so simple, and yet it is so hard. When you talk to people about like, oh yeah, just you do some, and it's not breathing fixes it, but breathing is getting fresh oxygen to my brain. Right. And so it's pulling me back into and grounding me in a way that maybe if I'm getting out of, I don't go through life thinking like I have to be regulated all the time. I don't think that that's real life. I think it's more, I want to know that I have the tolerance in a very adaptive, healthy way to tolerate whatever stress comes my way or situations that come my way in a given day. The other massive thing that I prioritize besides water, I didn't say water, but like it literally is water, breathing, and sleep are like my main things. So I've kind of become I used to like try to stay up. We would watch TED or we would watch Office or something like that, going to bed. And I would be up until like, I don't know, 11 or 12. And then I'd have to be up at 5 because I typically get at my office early in the morning as opposed to staying late because of school. And so last year I just started prioritizing like, okay, I'm going to prioritize getting in bed by 9. And then my like super zone out, sleep mask that like cuts out everything. Um, Magnesium. I'm not giving medical advice here, but I'm just saying look into it. Magnesium, especially if you're like perimenopausal age, magnesium glycinate citrate, it can be magical. And so prioritizing that rest gives me a greater window of tolerance of handling. So I don't think where I would have maybe potentially slumped back into some potential burnout. I think CG at one point when I first started practicing in therapy, I think at one point I was like, yeah, I'm just so zoned out when I go home at the end of the day. Oh my word, Christy. Okay, well, probably because you don't need to see 8 people in a row. Right. But like in my brain, I was like, well, no, they're all different people and you're navigating different. So like my little ADD brain is like, boop, 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 like it's on fire. But then I would like leave and I call it, I'm like a closeted introvert. So like the way that I repair is actually just to be with myself or like with my dog. I can handle, y'all have met my spouse. So like being with my spouse is great too, just because he's quiet. And so he's not demanding on my windows of anything. And so it's just kind of interesting. Like I just remember having that conversation with her and then I think I had like a gap or something where I was like, you know what, I'm going to readjust. Oh yeah. Like school was starting. I think this was last year. School was starting. And so that was a perfect time for me to readjust my schedule to where I wasn't here until 9 o'clock at night and all of those different things that honestly, like that's why people who work, you know, in any kind of like caregiving or therapeutic or whatever medical setting, right? It's why they can experience high loads of burnout because there's just a constant giving. And then there's a forgetfulness of like giving to yourself. And that's why that ADD part is important because I would forget to eat. Like I would be prompted to eat because my kids would be like, I'm hungry. When are we going to have lunch? I'm like, oh, I didn't even think about it. Because if it's out of sight, it is out of my mind. Right. And so like prioritizing eating something, all those things are just different ways. I don't think I actually answered your question. I think I rambled into all the things, but um, you're seeing my brain at 2 p.m., not 8 a.m. But it's still delightful. So yeah, prioritizing, just that's the kind of care that I give for myself or like communicating to Matt, like, okay, like I take Vyvanse. And it's been a game changer for me. And so medication, and then I also take supplements, but it's been a game changer for me. So like prioritizing like, hey, Matt, can you make me breakfast? And I know that's like a different world that I get to live in that he's going to make me breakfast, but could you make me breakfast? Because I notice my afternoon is different when I eat something. Because I can't tell you how many times I'll message CG or whatever, or even Brittany or Joe, or just be like, oh yeah, I mean, I haven't even eaten today. Like I had a smoothie. Well, why am I having a smoothie at work? Well, because I can drink it while I'm meeting with people, right? Instead of actually just like taking the lunch break. And that comes back to like how I view time, right? I mean, it's like a whole thing. I should probably go see my therapist on that one. Yeah. Like I got to get the most out of my time here because then I can prioritize when I get home my people. And I don't want to be up here for 30 minutes more, an hour more, just so I can eat lunch and then have an afternoon up here. And that sounds whatever, but I mean, that's just kind of what it is, being in the family dynamic with my people it's more important than eating apparently. So smoothie. And now I'm getting an egg muffin in the morning with, yeah. So now I'm eating breakfast in the morning. It's great.
I'm
There's
so proud of
definitely,
you.
oh, sorry, CG. I was just gonna
Go
say
ahead.
there's definitely something more to the not wanting to eat or having a hard time noticing our hunger as survivors than just the like we don't make the time for it. Um, because I've seen this in the community, I've seen it in myself. I've literally talked to my therapist about like why can I not figure out when I'm hungry or like why is that such a hard thing for me? Um, so side tangent there. It was definitely more than just not deciding to take the time. Um,
I mean, I think it's like an ADD thing, but I also think it's like a childhood thing because most of my trauma is experienced in trauma in childhood. And we didn't always have what we needed and that kind of stuff. So yeah, it was often like a scarcity mentality of like it's okay to go without. Um, or well, I don't think it was like it was said that it was okay. It was like we just go without. I think that that's what it was.
Learned deprivation. There we go. All right, CG, I'll let you finish this up.
Great. Um, yes, there is definitely a lot more around the connection with food and hearing those signals from the body as survivors. Um, Part of my recovering from burnout process was actually realizing how I was in this like adrenal fatigue cycle and not eating was making it worse. And so ones from this like particular book that I was reading was essentially the acknowledgement of like I won't feel hungry because I'm so used to not feeling hungry that it was basically like here's the protocol and it was like eat within a certain time of waking up and then like eat every like 3 hours throughout the day like eat something like make sure you're eating something until the body then recognizes like okay this is what hungry feels like this is what full feels like and I would say that that took me probably a solid year of eating more based on time of the day than on anything else for me to actually be able to tell my own like hunger sensations again. And that's very connected to kind of my overall approach now and when I'm thinking about burnout or how to like make sure I'm not falling back into burnout. Because at first, what burnout looked like when I was addressing it was just aggressively sleeping. Like I would just let myself sleep as much as possible. And sometimes that was 12 to 14 hours a day. Like I remember when I was in EMDR, like I had committed to myself that I would just sleep whenever I needed to. And it was like a low amount of sleep for any given day was 10 hours. And it was like so apparent to me just how exhausted I was from all of the years of just relentlessness. Relentlessness of the abuse, but also relentlessness of my own work schedule that I like put on myself and the expectations and how those things compound. But now, as I think about these things, it's very much from the perspective of, and when I look at all the different areas of life, how am I making sure I'm building in margin in each area, right? So like going back to the food, like I know my mood will feel more stable if I'm eating regularly. Like I know that my mood will feel more stable if I'm sleeping regularly. You know, like all of these things that seem kind of simple and straightforward but it is making sure that there's enough margin so that when things get stressful, because it's not if, right? It's never if things get stressful. It's when they get stressful, do I have enough padding in place that I can weather those storms? And and that's really how I think about it now. And then also intentionally completing the stress cycle. Like when I feel myself getting activated, instead of like pushing it down, it's like, okay, I'm going to address this right now. And I have, my tools that I typically go to deal with those things. But it is realizing how often I just like push my feelings aside or my struggles aside and assumed it would be okay if I just didn't acknowledge them. Whereas now it's like, okay, I will acknowledge, I will complete the stress cycle, and then I will be actually moving on from it instead of just telling myself that I've moved on from it. And so that's all helped kind of create the sense of stability and structure and more ease, even when things are stressful and overwhelming. Because again, it is when, not if, those things happen, unfortunately. And also unfortunately, we've hit the end of our time again. And we didn't even get to talk about the necessity of rest or addressing the like feelings of failure that comes with resting and all those good things. So we'll have to figure out if that's a whole nother episode or what we're doing there. But um, In the meantime, thank you for listening to the podcast. If you'd like more information about our organization, visit us at louderthansilence.org or follow us on Instagram at louderthansilence.org. This podcast and all of our programs at LTS come from your donations, so please consider donating today to support the work. And don't forget to subscribe for the most current episodes. We will see you next month.